How's it going, everybody? It's the Poor Sports Seattle podcast. This is Casey McLean. We are back on Twitter. We took a brief hiatus. I had a little while ago, I realized that Twitter had changed from charging me like $17 a month, whatever it was when the premium feature first came around, to $40 a month. And I was like, do I even need this? I certainly am not going to pay $40 a month for Twitter premium. I did a little more. First off, I found out I can't live stream unless I have Twitter Premium, and did a little research. There's a cheaper deal, so we're back, baby. We're back on Twitter. Nobody cares, but we are back on Twitter. Today we have a lot to talk about. Obviously, the Mariners played a historically important series. The Apple Cup happened, and the Seahawks dominated the Saints. So a lot to talk about. See you after the song. All right, we are back. I have solved my childcare issues that were leading to this podcast not going live. We are officially live on a Monday, which is the promise of this here poster, and that's to the right of me on the screen, to the right or to the left. I don't know. Can't remember how you guys see it. It's to the right of me on my screen. Anyways. We are live on a Monday, a big Monday. The Mariners had just an absolutely historic victory over the Astros. There was a lot of nerves going into that series, and it felt like the Mariners, being the Mariners, would find a way to screw this up, and they did not. They exceeded all expectations. I think every self-respecting Mariners fan would have been perfectly happy with a 2-1 split of the series, where you win the series, you take the season tiebreaker, and go into games against Colorado and a Dodgers team that might not have a lot to play for, and just have those tiebreakers in hand. But to go sweep, and to sweep in dominating fashion, to never really have, I mean, the game one of the series on Friday, where Victor Robles makes the crazy catch, that game was a little bit in doubt, but last night's game was never really in doubt. And to win in that fashion, whatever, people make a lot of stuff about statements. I think a lot about data, and I bristle at the idea of something being a statement, and something being a statement being particularly important. But if there is such a thing as something being important, an important statement, this was it. Also, the Seahawks, the Mariners playoff odds, by the way, presently at 100%. And let's get this Victor Robles slide up here. The playoff odds, according to Fangraphs, are at 100%. Now, Fangraphs playoff odds are very obviously rounded up to 100%. Being up 3 games in your division, having tiebreakers against a bunch of your opponents, it means that it's 99.9 plus, like, it's very, very high, 99.95 or higher. That's what 100% means, I believe, on Fangraphs' website. Technically, the Mariners have not clinched a playoff spot, but this is probably the earliest. It's got to be the earliest they've clinched since like 2001. Obviously, they've only made one playoff appearance, but I mean, it might be the earliest they've clinched in the history of the franchise. Functionally clinched, I should say. They're also, by the way, they're 2 games ahead of the Tigers and 3 games functionally with the tiebreaker. The Mariners are probably going to have a bye. And I have some mixed feelings about that. I'd be curious to hear what you think about having a bye versus going straight in and playing the 3 games as the higher seed, playing 3 games in T-Mobile Park. On one hand, 3 straight games in T-Mobile Park as a fan, someone who wants to buy tickets to these games, that's kind of exciting. You get to go pick whatever game there is. You get to go buy tickets to that game. I am still going to try to buy tickets. I am still going to try to attend a game. We'll see. I don't know if that's going to, I have a schedule. I have a mediocre comedy career and 2 children, so we'll see how that goes. But I did my time this season. I took my daughter to 2 baseball games very recently. I feel like I'm owed an adult baseball game. My kids are not. My daughter is not compelled by the Mariners playoff push. She was annoyed we were watching the games. I should be allowed to go watch these games on my own without my kids, right? Go with some buddies. Especially like she's not. Maybe my father-in-law. Maybe I take my father-in-law, but this kid isn't gonna care. Anyways, yeah, it was better than you could have expected. I The Brian Wu, I will give some credit to myself. I was early. Brian Wu got injured and had to miss. He got pulled early, I think after like less than 70 pitches in the Friday game, and there was a lot of concern. And immediately, to me, logically speaking, and I'm just going to give myself a little bit of credit, but I'll tell you the reason why. I tweeted this. It got a couple retweets and some likes and quite a few views. The reason I immediately did not think it was an arm injury is typically you would not try to throw again. If your arm hurt, you would not try to throw again. My immediate thought was that it was something that was tight. And my thought was actually lower body based on the way he was not finishing the throwing process. And I'll tell you, I got very drunk one. This is a story about me the baseball player. I know you care about that quite a bit. I got very drunk when I was 23 years old, 22 years old, and I had a tryout for the so I got very drunk, and I was at a movie theater. I was running down the stairs to go to the bathroom, and you know how movie theater steps are like, they're like 1.5 or 2.5 steps deep. They're like always in between a step. While I was running down, I caught my heel, landed my full weight on my ankle. I was like certain that I had broken my leg. My whole leg went numb, but I was drunk, went to the bathroom. I was like, okay, well, I don't feel a ton of pain. It doesn't feel great, but I don't feel a ton of pain. And I kind of felt it out, figured out I was like, I think I'm okay. And I played pool. We walked. I did all kinds of stuff that night. Woke up the next morning, super sprained ankle. 1 month later, I had a baseball tryout for the Puget Sound Senior Baseball League, and I had not thrown a ball in that month because my ankle was recovering. And I remember my first pitch in the bullpen. I think I threw a strike, but it was like the weight of my body, and I was way less fat. I'm fat now. I was not fat back then. I was a thin guy, and the weight of my body landing on my ankle, I just collapsed to the ground. I fell to the ground. And then the second pitch, I fell to the ground also. And finally, by the third pitch, I figured out a way to get my bearings. But the reason I say that is I was not able to fully extend. I wasn't able to put everything into a pitch. That's why I thought Brian Wu had a lower body injury. It being a pec, I will say a pec was less good than I was hoping for. If it was a back, if it was an ankle, these are things, but a pec starts to get into that, like, in the throwing motion, in the arm, like that's, I think, is potentially more concerning than people have allowed it to be for themselves, especially for his long-term future. And Wu, by the way, looked as good as I've ever seen him. The command of that high fastball and this pitching staff's embrace of that high fastball, I'm really impressed with it. And I've been someone who has been critical of this starting pitching staff. Not that they're bad. Not that any one of them is bad, by the way. I think they're all very good pitchers. But there's been all this conversation about them being historically good, and this is some massive strength. It's some unique strength that the Mariners have. And yes, they are very good. All three of them are very good. I think they have 5 number 2 or 3 starters and don't have like an outright ace. And maybe Logan Gilbert is that now. Brian Wu has done everything to vault himself into the conversation as someone who is like a lockdown ace. Certainly a guy that can eat some innings, that has eaten some innings and been effective. This series, the starting pitchers were dominant. I've always said they are very good, not historically good. The starting pitching staff, 17 innings pitched, cut short, would be more, except Brian Wu was pulled after 5 because of the injury. Probably would have gotten to 7. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he gives up another run. Maybe he doesn't. But probably would have gotten to at least 7 innings. Would have been my guess. So 17 innings pitched, 18 strikeouts, 2 walks, 1 run allowed, 9 hits. The 1 run was on a home run. Just an absolute dominant performance across those 3 games from the Mariners starting pitchers. And I mean, yeah, it's like it's hard to find a fault in that starting pitching staff, and the offense was also very good. Randy Arozarena got off the schneid. Cal Raleigh hits 2 home runs. He breaks Ken Griffey Jr.'s record, and I think that in a dream world, if you could write the story yourself, like write the fairy tale or the fable yourself, I think you would have had Cal Raleigh hit the record-breaking home run in T-Mobile Park. Pretty obviously. However, if it was going to be against anyone else, if it was going to be anywhere else, being in a hotly contested playoff race with, if the Mariners aren't the Astros' biggest rival, I think that the Astros, or sorry, if the Mariners aren't the Astros' biggest rival, I certainly think the Astros are the team that the Mariners have the most animosity against. The Mariners fan base has the most animosity against. So if you can't write the perfect fable, the perfect fairy tale, I think the next best thing was to have Cal Raleigh hit those home runs in a series where you were essentially eliminating the Astros from AL West contention. Also, I mean, that there is a catch that I cannot find a replay of. And it's a real testament to how good of a defender he was. But Andrew Jones made a catch many years ago when I was in high school that I watched. I watched SportsCenter. I watched the play on the Atlanta Braves recap, and then I watched it as, like, I think it was the top play. It might not have even been the top play. I watched it as in the top plays, so I watched it twice in the broadcast, and then I watched the full SportsCenter again, as you used to do. And so I watched it a total of 4 times, and every single time I saw it, I would see the ball in the air, knowing intellectually that Andrew Jones caught this ball and not being able to believe it. And because he caught this ball like full Superman dive in the gap, and very similar, especially the way the camera worked, where the camera was focused on Julio Rodriguez, and then we see Victor Robles kind of just like appear in the screen seemingly from nowhere and make this insane diving catch. It felt very similar, where every time you rewatched it, you're like, it's just an insane play. And was it Myers, the Astros base runner? I don't know what you do about that, because I do kind of think that what's lost in that conversation, and maybe I just haven't heard it from the Astros perspective, but I think what's lost in it a little bit is that you don't have to you're not the game winning or tying run. You are not the decisive run. You don't need to run that aggressive as the guy that is not the decisive run. I don't know what his base coach was saying. Maybe the base coach was telling him to be aggressive. Maybe it wasn't his mistake, but it was somebody's mistake, because if that ball drops in, it's probably, I would guess, like kind of a bang-bang play at home. And if he's out, then you're talking about 2 outs and you made an out at home for a run that would not have decided the game, would not have even moved it into extra innings. So that felt like a bit of a mistake to me, but a mistake that was on a play where that ball in the air had to feel like, I actually haven't seen, I would like to see the catch percentage of that. I have not seen it for Victor Robles, the play on that, but I imagine the catch percentage was very low. That is a tough play to make. That is a play that not a lot of outfields make. And I will say I was watching I don't watch a lot of Sunday Night Baseball. I guess the only 2 times I've watched Sunday Night Baseball in recent years have been when the Mariners have been on. They had like the historically long drought from being on Sunday Night Baseball, and they were on there, I think it was last year, right? And then this year. So I'm not, there's part of me that really misses Joe Morgan and John Miller. I know those guys aren't beloved announcers, but it always just felt like, I mean, having Joe Morgan out there, a guy who really bridged the gap to my generation from like the real, like, when did Joe Morgan play? I want to say it was like the 1950s, but I feel like I'm going to look like a fool. Joe Morgan he died October 11th. He died on my 5th wedding anniversary. I was probably in a town with my wife, or October 11th, 2020. So played in the 1960s. So he really is a guy that bridged the gap from that, like those 1960s teams to my generation. I remember I had this game on on a regular Nintendo, NES. Did you guys call it regular Nintendo, by the way? Nintendo Entertainment System, the first one, the one with the cartridges you blew into, the big square cartridges, called Legends of the Diamond. And Joe Morgan, I mean, this game had to have come out in like the mid-90s. I guess his career was not that far gone. If it came out in the mid-90s and Joe Morgan stopped playing in 1984. But one of these guys, like one of the kind of original power-hitting middle infielders, wins the MVP twice. This historic career, and just to hear him talk about baseball to me was just, it just seems so much more interesting than David Cone and Eduardo Perez, and it's nothing against those guys in particular. David Cone was a very good pitcher. Eduardo Perez was like fine. But I guess the thing is, I don't even find it's possible that I discount Eduardo Perez, his broadcasting ability, because of how bad the trade that brought him to Seattle was. There was if you remember the trade when he played in Seattle, it was him and Ben Broussard, the right and left-handed platoon splits of the Cleveland, now Guardians organization, got traded for in separate trades. And I'm looking this up right now, but I'm gonna, off memory, I think it might have been the Asdrubal Cabrera to Cleveland trade. Let's see. Yeah. Asdrubal Cabrera straight up for Eduardo Perez for like 2 months of Eduardo Perez, maybe 3 months of Eduardo Perez, June 30th, 2006. And Cabrera would go on to be pretty good. And let's see, Eduardo Perez in Seattle. Let's get those Seattle stats. They're not going to be good. That's my guess. Where are we at? In Seattle, Eduardo Perez, in exchange for Asdrubal Cabrera, as essentially a part-time player, by the way, in a half season worth of time on the roster, 102 plate appearances, 195 batting average, 304 on base, 241 slugging percentage. It was bad at the time. I didn't have like, this 2006. This was before I got into like blogging and stuff like that, but I remember believing it was bad at the time. Ben Broussard, same year, I believe. Yeah, 2006. He ends up playing 2007 with the Mariners also, so they get him for a little bit longer. And at the time, he was a little bit younger. But by the way, he was out of baseball in 2008. The trade happens in 2006. Ben Broussard was so bad, he was out of baseball in 2008. In Seattle, he ends up going in 2006, 177 plate appearances, 238, 282, 427, no world beater. Has a little bit better year in 2007. But this is all to say, is Eduardo Perez good at that? Am I wrong? Is he a bad announcer? Like, Carl Ravitch is fine. I have no problem with Carl Ravitch. I'm not. I know people didn't like John Miller and Joe Morgan by the end. In fact, I believe there was like an analytics blog that was, the name was like specifically shitting on Joe Morgan, but yeah, they were just so much more compelling to me to listen to those two guys than Carl Ravitch and Eduardo Perez and David Cone. I will say, David Cone is like a little bit of a... Is David Cone good? That's the thing, is like, I know Carl Ravitch is a great professional broadcaster. Is David Cone any good? Is this what it's come down to? Are we interested in what David Cone has to say? I guess David Cone's probably slightly underappreciated by the world of baseball, but man, what was he worth? 56 wins above replacement. Is he in the Hall of Fame? He should be. I don't know. Maybe he's more in the Joe Morgan category than I'm giving him credit for. Let's see. Is David Cone in the Hall of Fame? He's not in the Hall of Fame. Probably should be in the Hall of Fame. 56 wins above replacement for a starting pitcher. Probably should be in the Hall of Fame. Oh, speaking of wins above replacement, the never-ending Cal Raleigh versus never-ending Cal Raleigh versus Aaron Judge debate is waging on. Aaron Judge has a higher wins above replacement. If Aaron Judge wins this award, I'm not going to be mad. I think that he probably deserves it slightly more than Cal Raleigh does. But if Cal Raleigh wins it, I'm going to be thrilled. That's great for the Mariners. It would be great for the Mariners if Cal Raleigh wins the MVP. There's all this like on the broadcast. That was what was kind of interesting is my consumption of baseball has been the Mariners broadcasts primarily, and then like the playoff broadcasts, and then occasionally they will have a StatCast broadcast, and if that ever comes around, I don't watch anything else. The Home Run Derby, I watch the StatCast version. So my exposure to the Seattle Mariners broadcast is certainly a little more analytics focused than I think other broadcasts are. But then I watch this, and there's a lot of talk about like average rotation on breaking balls, and average movement on different kinds of breaking balls, and average movement on fastballs, and average velocity on fastballs, and exit velocity and launch angle. And I kind of, though I don't know if I think David Cohn or Eduardo Perez are very good at the actual broadcasting part, I kind of enjoyed the Sunday Night Baseball, how much they at least acknowledge advanced analytics. One other thing is Clayton Kershaw has chosen to retire, and we're not going to talk a ton about Clayton Kershaw, though he was, kind of an in-between eras guy that maybe doesn't get his full due as one of the greatest pitchers of all time. A guy who had a Randy Johnson-esque run of dominance, a Pedro Martinez-esque run of dominance. But that probably does not get included in there because he's like half in an era where guys used to throw complete games and used to throw a lot of innings. And I suspect, I'm going to pull him up right now, but I suspect Clayton Kershaw might have a 300-plus strikeout season. That was always a benchmark that I cared about. Because Randy Johnson did it a couple times in Seattle. It was like so impressive to me to strike out 300 batters. So in one season, 2015, Clayton Kershaw, 301 strikeouts. A guy that was just like, so dominant. And if you look at Clayton Kershaw's 2013 through, basically 2020, but really like 2011 through 2016, some of the most dominant years, maybe one of the most dominant 6-year stretches in the history of baseball. And he decided to call it quits. And you were like, oh, well, it lines up that he could pitch in Seattle. He would be scheduled to start in Seattle. Hold on. This is Aaron Shigley, I'm going to say. What Cal brings on the defensive side needs to be brought up more. This isn't a Silver Slugger award. It's the most valuable player. And that has to be Cal having both an impact on both sides of the ball. By the way, totally agree. And I want you to know wins above replacement considers his defense and values his defense very high, by the way. I'm going to pull up Cal Raleigh on Fangraphs just to give you, and especially Fangraphs, by the way. So he is given 16 and a half runs of value. That's what they're attributing to his defense. So he's been worth 8.8 wins above replacement, and that includes his defense. I totally agree, by the way. And I think that's why it's a discussion. If it was just a hitting award, you're absolutely right. Aaron Judge would win that by far. Aaron Judge has been by far, which is crazy to say, considering how good Cal's season has been. He's been by far the best offensive player in baseball. He's having one of the best offensive seasons in the history of baseball. Cal happens to have hit more home runs and plays a tougher defensive position, and that's why it's a discussion. And even with if you just go on straight up value, it's really close. And I think that Aaron Judge is ahead. But again, I'm rooting for Cal to win it. There's no downside, especially, by the way, now that he's signed to an extension already, there's no downside to me. And they made a big deal on the Sunday Night Baseball broadcast about how he has put in roots in Seattle. And you love to hear that. You love to hear that Josh Naylor, who's, by the way, a guy that we're going to talk about a lot in the offseason because I have a lot of apprehension about the Mariners giving him big money. But you love to hear about a hitter wanting to stay in Seattle, putting in roots in Seattle, to the point that you're like, Cal, do you really still have to do this local plumber ad? Is this really are we hurting for money that much? You just signed $100+ million deal. You got to trade off the big dumper. Doesn't even actually, I don't even know if he says big dumper in the plumbing ad, by the way. Better than stop Beacon or stop freaking call Beacon and having Marshawn Lynch. I got to tell you that. I don't think Kershaw is going to pitch in Seattle, which is sad. My cousin is going to a couple of those games, and I was hoping he'd get a chance to see Kershaw's final game, and I think that they're going to hold him till the postseason. I think that's right. I think that's what I heard. I could be wrong, but anyway, yeah, I'd be curious to hear anyone else's opinion on the Cal Raleigh thing. Again, I'd be happy if he hits 60 home runs. Great, and it's all just value to me. And we live in an era where that stuff has kind of been quantified for us to a degree. In the past, I think Cal Raleigh would have a maybe even a stronger argument. I think because writers do and has historically have cared about position, and they've cared about team success, and they've cared about a lot of things that Cal Raleigh brings that are kind of like the old school intangible stuff. And he's also been really good at a premium defensive position. But yeah, I mean, Aaron Judge, is he still sitting at 49 home runs? Judge still has 49 home runs, 199 WRC. I mean, you're into like Barry Bonds territory, frankly. Like maybe not quite, but like, let's look at, I'm going to pull up this. God damn. So WOBA, which is, if you're familiar with WRC plus, WOBA is the not park adjusted and not indexed against the rest of the league. It's like the batting average or slugging percentage or OPS that's not the plus. But I want to see just like the highest. I'm going to pull up the highest WOBA seasons in the history of baseball, and I'm going to do this as quickly as I can and vamp as long as I can because I'm certain that the highest is going to be Barry Bonds. We'll go since 19. No, we'll go live ball era. Oh, I got to be. Fangraphs got me. You used to be able to. Oh wait, if I just sign in, nobody. This isn't exciting for anyone. Let me sign in here real quick. Let's see if I can very quickly pull this up. If not, we'll have it for the next episode or the next live episode. Yeah, I'm not gonna be able to pull it up in time. Not gonna be fun for anyone to watch, but I suspect Aaron Judge's season is gonna rank very highly, like certainly top 50 all-time WOBA seasons, if not higher than that. Really amazing season. Played a lot of DH. So did Cal. Plays I will say, less impressive brand of defense than Cal does. Cal's like actually a very good defender. Trying to get to Judge here. Yeah, Judge is like an iffy. He's like an iffy outfielder, and he plays a corner outfield spot. He's 89 games in right field with positive defensive value there. And then I guess that's all he's played, but he's only played 89 games in the field. Not as impressive as Cal, who's catching on a regular basis. So yeah, I think at some point you start to the bye is going to be probably sewn up relatively soon. They say like a 3 games are the magic number for the Mariners to win the division. I think it's actually 2 because of the tiebreaker. Once the bye is tied up, if you don't have a real shot at the number 1 seed, I would think that you could start to kind of shape the rot. So like maybe you find a Tacoma arm. Maybe you get a I can't remember if Emerson Hancock and Logan Evans are both healthy, but like maybe you give a start to one of those guys instead of taxing the arms of your maybe more valuable starters. And one thing I would like to see the Mariners do, and I don't think they're going to do this, but Herangelo St. J he pitched in Double-A. He was relatively impressive in Double-A. I don't think he's pitched in, let's see if I can pull up a game log and see when his last actual game was. Can we get a game log? So his last game was September 14th, so 8 days ago. He has done all the stuff you want him to do. He's been better against higher competition. He's still striking out batters, striking out more than a batter per 9 innings. I'd like to see him get a shot to potentially make the postseason roster. I don't think they're going to do that. It's the end of a long season. I believe his innings numbers went up quite a bit, but the Mariners would benefit greatly from a more dominant left-handed arm behind Gabe Spire. Who is I can't even think of the guy. I'm Caleb Ferguson is just like unreliable. I actually think that maybe an unspoken or underspoken need of this Mariners team is, I don't think this bullpen is nearly as good. I think that there's a lot of smoke and mirrors and a lot of batted ball luck that's gone into the Mariners bullpen having respectable numbers. And if you could bring up a guy, and I understand, maybe you stunt St. J's development a little bit. If you give him a taste of the majors and next year he goes to the minors, maybe he's very sad. Again, I can relate to this. About a month ago, I was in Spokane opening for Bert Kreischer at a soccer arena with 8,000 people in attendance. Today, I am finally feeling the end of the hangover depression from that. I think I'm coming out of the fog completely. I understand you could stunt someone's development. I feel like, why would I do comedy? I'll never reach this level that I got to see somebody else at. It's not a concept anymore. I got to see 8,000 people buy tickets to see a guy. I'll never get there. That's maybe the coolest thing I've ever done in comedy. Maybe probably the coolest thing I ever will do. Statistically, it's not very likely that I'll ever perform for more than 8,000 people. You think someone's going to trust me to do that? These are the internal, intrusive, negative thoughts that I have. And I could see that happening to a guy but he could also be the next Francisco Rodriguez. St. J, by the way, if you don't know, I probably took for granted that everyone knows who he is. He's the Mariners' ambidextrous pitching prospect that throws like high 90s from the right side and mid 90s from the left side and pitches pretty well from both sides, and a guy that would be very valuable if he could be productive in your postseason bullpen. Can you give him some innings this week? Give him some innings. No harm. Give him some innings. I also want to say this, because I don't think I said it at the time. To bring up Harry Ford and essentially not let him play. Maybe they wanted to see if he could earn a postseason roster spot, but like, why would you not? It wasn't like the Rainier season was over. I mean, I guess because Mitch Garver's had some injury issues this year, but like, does Harry Ford have? I think the last time I looked, he had 5 plate appearances. Why did it pull up Harry Heilman? Yeah, 5 plate appearances. He's got 1 walk, no hits. Was it worth it? Was it worth it to bring him up and not play? It just seems very curious to me to not give him time, like not give him some opportunities to succeed. Anyways, though, all things very exciting as a Mariners fan. Great weekend to be a Seattle sports fan. And we're gonna move on from the Mariners for now and talk about the Seahawks, who had just a truly dominant performance. The Seahawks had a truly dominant performance against the Saints. They end up winning 44-13. I saw some comments on. I've probably talked about this on the podcast a few times. I listen to the Brock and Salk radio show when I'm driving my kids around because it's on YouTube, and so I can rewind and pause and all that stuff. The audio quality is better on YouTube than over your car radio, and it's not that I like Brock and Salk that much. I don't even know who hosts the morning show on KJR. I have that on, and I pulled it up on my phone to listen to on the drive while my kids are in the car, and I don't want to listen to a bunch of comedians talk about eating ass on a podcast in front of my children. And so I pull up their YouTube video and I see someone comments, the pass rush is still mediocre. I was like, that does not make sense to me from what I've seen. It seems to me this year that while rushing mostly 4 guys, the Seahawks have gotten quite a bit of pressure. That's my opinion. And I kind of think if you only watch one team and you only consider like if you consider the best cornerback to be the guy that gets the most interceptions, well, it's like a keyhole view of what the value of a cornerback is, because it's really rare that guys get multiple interceptions. And also, like we saw in the Richard Sherman era, Sherman would get some interceptions, but he also would spend entire games being avoided by quarterbacks, and you can't get interceptions unless they throw to your guy. So sometimes it's like when London Fletcher would lead the league in tackling on some of the worst defenses in football because, yeah, he allowed guys to make it all the way up to the, he'd make a tackle 7 yards downfield. Who gives a shit? That's not an elite linebacker. So the Seahawks are, I want to say it's like, we'll pull it up real quick. NFL defensive. This is what I pulled up their, so in sacks, they have 6 sacks on the year, which puts them about middle of the pack. They're like, let's find the actual, they have 6, which puts them in like, I want to say it's like 16th or 17th place, something like that. Not super impressive, middle of the pack, but if you look at the underlying stats, the stats that make sacks, the stats that you would want to look at if you were predicting who actually has it, like who's been unlucky and who has a pass rush that should be yielding more sacks. The Seahawks are first, this is according to Football Reference, they are first in the league in pressures, 32 pressures. They are third in the league in pressure percentage, meaning passing downs, like the denominator is total passing downs. Part of the reason why their percentage is lower or is lower than other teams is because they've led some of these games and they've seen a lot of opposing pass attempts. Their hurries, they are second in the league in hurries. They are third in the league in hurry percentage. By the way, the Buffalo Bills are dominating these stats and also only have 6 sacks. And then the other thing about the Seahawks is their blitz percentage. So they're doing that well in all those stats, and their blitz percentage is second lowest in the league. So what that means is if you only rush 4 guys, you have 7 players to drop into coverage. It means you can double team guys. You can have safeties over the top. You can have linebackers underneath because you're only rushing 4 guys and you're being very effective. The Seahawks defense, I said it during the game, this is the best to me the defense has looked. I said it, tried to say it in a funny way, which is that it's the best it's looked since Pete Carroll was in his early 60s, but I'm talking like prime Legion of Boom era. The amount of disruption that pass rush causes. It's easy to say that the secondary was responsible for every interception. It's not true. Pass rush, coverage helps the pass rush and pass rush helps coverage. These are intertwined things. And the Seahawks have been able to create a lot of turnovers. And that's probably also the result of a very good pass rush. They haven't gotten the sack numbers, but they have made quarterbacks uncomfortable and tipped balls and changed arm angles and changed arm motions and hit arms while they were throwing and in general just caused enough chaos that quarterbacks felt like they had to make decisions quickly, and it's led to turnovers. And that's to me that's like these are like the kind of hidden. It's very similar to me, and I will admit that this isn't the first time I've said this today. I recorded a podcast earlier today with Dan Viens of the Seahawks Forever podcast. We were talking about the Apple Cup. But I was talking about how this reminds me a little bit of in the mid 2010s, the the Seahawks have such a bad offensive line. It was like this constant narrative. By the way, eventually it came true. Eventually they were paying so many guys that they could not afford to pay for a great offensive line. But they would have this reputedly horrible offensive line and then also have the best running attack in football, or one of the best running attacks in football. It didn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense. It does not make any sense. In the same way, like the Seahawks are doing stuff with this defense that, like, the whole package is a very good defense. Do you want to give all the credit to the secondary? Of course not. Do you want to give all the credit to the defensive line? Of course not. But the total product is a very good defense. Sam Darnold's looked pretty good so far this year. I mean, I will say, and I'm going to talk about the Apple Cup in just a minute, but the what we've learned about Sam Darnold to this point, I think, is limited because, like, yesterday he was incredibly efficient, but it was also it was in a dominant effort against the team, and he didn't have to pass for his life for the last 3 quarters of the game. It was very efficient. He looks like he has great chemistry with Jackson Smith and Jigba, and many of the things, Darnold's thrown some interceptions, so he's not a wholesale change from Geno Smith. He also throws interceptions. He's thrown some bad interceptions. He does get the ball out faster, is what it feels like. And I think the offense, and it's tough for me to admit this because I was as big of a Ryan Grubb loyalist as you'll find. Ryan Grubb's contributions to the Washington Huskies, I think, should never go understated. And he stuck around for another year. I really loved Ryan Grubb. So it's hard for me to say this, but Clint Kubiak's running an offense that's going to be more efficient in the NFL. He's running an offense that will, I think, will allow quarterbacks to get the ball out quickly. And I think that's what the Seahawks need in this present state of their offensive line, which is better. I think their offensive line is certainly improved. And I think that they'll probably extend Charles Cross. They already extended Abraham Lucas, and they drafted Gray Zabel very high. They're probably going to continue to invest there, I would guess, because there are still flaws. Is Jalen Sundell your long-term answer at center? I don't think Anthony Bradford is the long-term answer at right guard. But the offensive line is vastly improved. And then, by the way, the Jackson Smith and Jigba played great. He's played great all season. He's proving that I was not thrilled about the Seahawks drafting him with the first round pick, and he's proving that he was worth it. There are people who think that he can't be a number 1 overall pick. There are people who think that he's completely redundant with Cooper Kupp. In some games, we haven't had to see because JSN has dominated the target share so much that, like, I don't know that we need, like, that anyone needs to see Cooper Kupp at that point. You'd rather have the ball in Jackson Smith and Jigba's hands. And then Torrey Horton. I honestly did not think Torrey Horton had, like, a pretty good camp by reports. I'm not at practice, but, like, by reports, he had a pretty good camp. Marquez Valdez-Scantling was iffy, and he's, like, an aging guy. When the idea popped up that Horton could be in line for those, like, number 3 receiver reps, and that could mean that Marquez Valdez-Scantling gets released, I was like, there's no way. There's no way the Seahawks are going to release a guy they gave guaranteed money to that's familiar with Clint Kubiak. By the way, I'm a little self-conscious. Did I say Gary Kubiak earlier in this? If I did, I obviously meant Clint, but I apparently have Alzheimer's syndrome if I do. I thought it was incredibly ballsy to release him knowing that you're going to get criticized. I imagine handing a guy over $1 million in guaranteed money and then cutting him isn't super popular with ownership. How much guaranteed money did he have, actually? Yeah, $1.5 million signing bonus. Giving a guy $1.5 million to not play for your team, probably not super popular with ownership. But Horton makes the big touchdown catch and obviously has the big kick return. And then after that, it was like, what is the what is even the desire to continue to pass the ball? And I will say that one thing that happened in this game is the Seahawks did not run the ball very well. And I was a little surprised because Jalen Milroe was on the active roster that we saw, I believe, 0 snaps of Jalen Milroe. If he was on the field, it was not under center. I thought we'd see a little more of that. I actually thought at the end of the game when they brought in Drew Lock, why are those snaps going to Drew Lock? I like Drew Lock as much as the next guy. Why are those snaps going to Drew Lock? Those should have been Jalen Milroe snaps, in my opinion. Whatever. There may be some dynamic that I'm not thinking of. Maybe they're trying to, maybe he shows up late to every meeting. I don't know. That does not sound like the character of the person that gets described, at least publicly, in Jalen Milroe. But the Seahawks, I mean, Kenneth Walker, George Halani, the other guy. Obviously, Zach Charbonnet was out. If you watch the game, you know that. Nobody had a very efficient day running the ball. But of course, the Seahawks just put the game away so early that it didn't matter. I don't know that you learn anything. I think you're like, it was nice to be able to rest guys late in the game and not, I think, come out of it pretty unscathed injury-wise, because you got to turn around and play a short week game against the Cardinals. But I don't know if you learned a ton. You're happy you won that game. I said last week, like, the Seahawks weren't going to be overlooking that game, but it seemed like it was going to be a game that they had a pretty good chance of winning, and they did. They played well, and they beat a significantly worse team. We also got to see Tyler Shuck. Remember when Tyler Shuck was like a popular draft pick? Probably most people don't, because most people aren't losers that are obsessed with the NFL draft. But I remember when they were talking about Tyler Shuck being a Seahawk. I was like, I just don't see it. I just don't like it. Anyways, all right, let's talk about the Apple Cup. And I will tell you, I did have a cool conversation with Dan Viennes about the future of the Apple Cup. So we're gonna just talk about this Apple Cup, and tomorrow, I believe it'll be tomorrow, this episode with Dan Viennes will come out. Really cool conversation. Dan Viennes of the Seahawks Forever podcast is, I think, a Washington State alum and certainly a lifelong fan, and has some kind of, I would say, sober perspective on the future of the game without, and this is kind of I think, a benefit of time. It's senseless at this point to be angry on either side. Certainly senseless if you're a Huskies fan to be mad at Cougars fans for their reaction to the Huskies' involvement in the dissolution of the Pac-12. It's that, I think that's certainly true. I think it's, at this point, it's pointless for Cougars fans to be angry at Huskies fans, because it's like, what would you have done? Do you think the Washington State Cougars, you think the University of Washington, or whatever, Washington State University, would have, like, made sure the Huskies had a spot in a prosperous new conference if it was obvious they had to leave that conference? I don't think so. I mean, nobody would do that. It's unfortunate. It's very sad that the Pac-12 situation has turned out this way, but it's a reality. And you'll hear me say it to Dan tomorrow, and we're going to talk about a lot more stuff. But, like, I'm happy the Huskies made the decision they made, even though it certainly sucks that it takes away from a tradition. And it was even my wife noticed. My wife doesn't notice anything about football. She's like, "Isn't this game normally later in the year?" Yeah, it is. It used to be. It won't be probably ever again, but it used to be. Either way, I think, again, what we've learned about the Huskies is, against bad teams, Damon Williams and Jonah Coleman can put up some numbers. And the Cougars kept it close, and it was admirable, and it was scary at a point, I would say. There was a point, I think it was 24-31, 31-24, and I was like, the Huskies aren't actually going to lose this game, are they? Like, there was a moment where I was like, fuck, this is bad. This could get bad. It felt like last year, where it was like, it seemed like they should win that game, and then they end up losing. John Mateer, obviously, is maybe more talented than we knew at the time, but there was a point this year where I had the same kind of anxiety. Like, this might be maybe the Huskies aren't as good as I thought they were. And I would say even like whatever the score's 59-24, but that's not representative of the actual, I think, how close that game was. The Cougars kept it tight, and at points were like outplaying or going punch for punch. And certainly, I think if you're a Huskies fan, you got to be a little anxious about the defense. And so, I don't think that we've learned that DeMond Williams. He's looked incredible against lesser talent. Jonah Coleman has looked just as good as he was, maybe better, maybe faster. Certainly was more involved in the passing game on Saturday than he has been in the past. But like, what did we learn about those guys? They can play great against lesser competition. But Ohio State's coming to town, and it's going to be so interesting. This is kind of the, like, maybe the first moment in the Big Ten where you're like, this is what it's all about. This is like why it's exciting to make that move, because you could not have gotten Ohio State to come to Washington a couple years ago. Like, reality is that they didn't, and you should listen to the episode with Dan Viennes where I talk about the future of the Apple Cup and what the incentives for each team is. You couldn't have convinced Ohio State to come to Washington. So yeah, I mean, I thought it was a very entertaining game, and especially considering my expectations were that the Huskies were going to blow it out, and even I, a Huskies fan, would feel bad at the end. And I do still feel a little bit bad, but not because it was such a drubbing. Like, the Huskies played good, and they win by a large margin in the end, but not because the Cougars were. I still think they're punching above their weight class in this game. And that's all you really want. And next year it's going to be even weirder because it's the season opener, and that's going to be bizarre. But that's all you can ask for is a game like that. I thought perfect outcome for the Huskies, perfect outcome for traditionalists who want to see this game continue because it was still entertaining. It was still competitive. Is this maybe the second to last time it ever happens in Martin Stadium in Pullman? Maybe. It's possible. Okay, I've had so many stand-up dates get canceled. Please follow me on Instagram and on follow me on X or whatever social, or on Twitter. But Casey McLean Comedy everywhere. CaseyMcLeanComedy.com. If you live in the Northwest, I'm probably coming to a city near you. And if you live in Louisville, Kentucky, or Wisconsin, I'm going there later in the year. So, anyways, thank you for listening. For those of you that did, and for those of you that didn't, go fuck yourselves.